I want to share with you the concept of integrating creativity into your daily work, how blending logic with playfulness can enhance your productivity and satisfaction. This module on creative working is designed to help you understand the importance of balancing structured work with unstructured play, allowing your natural creativity to flourish. By embracing creativity in your professional life, you can transform routine tasks into engaging challenges, leading to more innovative and fulfilling work experiences. Playing while working. As humans, we are inherently playful beings. From a young age, we engage with the world through play, exploring without specific objectives. The essence of play lies in creativity, finding new ways to approach familiar tasks and discovering innovative solutions. When applied to the workplace, this playful mindset can turn routine tasks into opportunities for creative problem solving and personal growth. Understanding the importance of play in your work is critical because it helps prevent boredom and apathy, which can quickly erode your enthusiasm and sense of belonging. By balancing a sense of play with the demands of work, you can keep your mind engaged and your attitude positive. However, neglecting this balance can lead to a monotonous work environment where the lack of creativity stifles innovation and diminishes job satisfaction. Fostering creativity. For some, creativity may feel distant or dormant, but it's an intrinsic part of being human. This section encourages you to rekindle your creative side by seeking inspiration from various sources, whether through TED Talks, books, or stories of creative individuals. By engaging with these resources, you can reignite your passion for creativity and bring that enthusiasm into your work. Fostering creativity is essential because it leads to greater innovation and a more dynamic work environment. The more you engage with creative thinking, the more you'll find yourself inspired to develop new ideas and approaches. On the other hand, if you allow routine to dominate your work life without infusing it with creativity, you risk becoming disengaged, leading to a decline in both your performance and your overall job satisfaction. Balancing play and work. Play is inherently unstructured, contrasting with the structured nature of work. This section explores how allowing your thought process to flow without constraints can lead to unexpected insights and new ways of doing things. By embracing this unstructured play, you open yourself up to discovering innovative solutions that structured thinking alone may not reveal. Balancing play with work is crucial because it keeps your mind flexible and open to new possibilities. By allowing yourself to play, you can uncover new methods, procedures, and ideas that can significantly improve your work. Failing to integrate play into your routine can lead to a rigid mindset, where creativity is stifled and the potential for growth is limited. Subconscious patterns work play. Your natural tendencies, such as your focus on people, activities, or information, influence how you approach work and play. This section discusses patterns like area of focus, people versus activities versus information, preference, maintenance versus development versus change, and direction focus, concept versus structure versus use. Understanding these patterns helps you identify where you can best apply your creative energies at work. Recognizing these subconscious patterns is important because they determine how you can most effectively engage in creative work. By understanding your natural preferences, you can tailor your approach to maximize your creative potential. Ignoring these patterns can lead to frustration and a lack of fulfillment, as your work may not align with your creative inclinations. Points to ponder about creative working. This section emphasizes the importance of choosing a workplace or type of work that nurtures your creativity. If your current role stifles your creative impulses, it may be time to consider a change. Creativity is more important than any job title or salary, as it directly impacts your happiness and sense of purpose. Understanding the significance of creative working is crucial for maintaining long-term motivation and satisfaction in your career. By regularly engaging your creative side, you can ensure that your work remains fulfilling and that you continue to grow both personally and professionally. Failing to prioritize creativity can lead to a sense of stagnation and dissatisfaction, ultimately affecting your overall quality of life. This module highlights the importance of integrating creativity into your work, offering insights into how playfulness can lead to more innovative and satisfying professional experiences. It encourages you to explore your creative potential and make it an essential part of your work routine.
Creative working, playing while embracing playfulness at work. In my experience, work becomes a lot more enjoyable when there's an element of play involved. We weren't born to be rigid, robotic beings. Humans are naturally playful. Think about it. As kids, we learned everything through play, and somehow, along the way, we started believing that work and play couldn't coexist. But I've seen that bringing a sense of casualness and creativity to work makes all the difference. It keeps things fresh, makes problem solving easier, and prevents that soul-crushing boredom that comes from repeating the same tasks every day. Of course, work has goals, deadlines, and responsibilities, but staying in a state of constant seriousness only drains the energy out of everything. I've found that balancing work with a bit of lightheartedness creates a much better rhythm. It keeps motivation high, ideas flowing, and people engaged. Balancing logic and creativity. The way I see it, work often demands structure, logic, and efficiency. Those are all left brain activities. But when you only engage that part of your mind, things can become stale pretty fast. Creativity, which comes from the right side of the brain, is where new ideas, fresh perspectives, and real excitement come from. The key is not to abandon structure, but to blend it with creative thinking. Even the most structured tasks have room for a little innovation. I've seen people transform dull routines just by finding smarter, more interesting ways to do them. Whether it's tweaking a process, approaching a task from a different angle, or simply adding a personal touch, small creative shifts make a huge difference. It keeps things engaging and, honestly, makes work feel less like a chore. Making routine work more interesting. A lot of people think they aren't creative, but I don't buy that. Creativity isn't limited to artists or designers. It's just a way of thinking. It's about looking at something familiar and seeing a new way to do it. I've found that the more you let yourself explore different approaches, the easier it becomes. You don't have to be some genius innovator. Just start small. Even rethinking the way you organize your tasks or communicate with your team can bring a refreshing change. I've also noticed that once you start bringing creativity into your work, it becomes a self-sustaining cycle. The more you experiment, the more ideas come to you. It's almost like training a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. The role of flow in creativity. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that you can't force creativity. It shows up when you allow yourself to flow. I used to think the only way to get things done was to focus hard and push through. But I've realized that stepping back and letting my mind wander often leads to better solutions. Some of my best ideas have come when I wasn't actively thinking about work at all. I've seen that workplaces tend to overemphasize focusing, but constant focus is exhausting. Letting the mind drift now and then actually helps more in the long run. It's during those moments when you're not fixated on a problem that fresh insights pop up. If I ever feel stuck, I take a step back, do something completely different, and let my brain make its own connections. Bringing creativity into the workplace. In my experience, the best work environments encourage curiosity and allow room for playfulness. I've seen teams that openly share ideas, experiment with different approaches, and aren't afraid to try something new. And those are the ones that thrive. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. Even small changes in how people collaborate can make a huge impact. Creativity isn't just about coming up with groundbreaking innovations. It's about making daily work more engaging and enjoyable. Sometimes just asking, what if we did it this way instead, is enough to open up a new path. I've found that when people feel safe to explore new ideas, work stops being a grind and starts feeling more like an interesting challenge. Creativity as a natural state. I truly believe that creativity is something we all have. It's just that some people have buried it under layers of routine. If work feels dull or repetitive, it's usually a sign that something needs to change. It might be the process, the approach, or even just the mindset. I've seen people completely transform their attitude toward work just by shifting how they engage with it. It's not about whether someone is naturally creative or not. It's about allowing that side of yourself to come through. The more you lean into creativity, the more naturally it comes. Instead of resisting playfulness at work, it should be embraced. It's what makes work feel meaningful, enjoyable, and ultimately more productive. Balancing logic and creativity. In my experience, the best work happens when there's a balance between structure and imagination. Too much logic and things get rigid and repetitive. Too much creativity and it can be chaotic without direction. I've seen that when people lean too far into either extreme, work becomes either uninspired or completely unmanageable. The key is to use both, logic to keep things on track and creativity to make the process more engaging and effective. Work often demands structure. There are deadlines, goals, and expectations that need to be met. That's the logical side of things, where planning, organization, and efficiency come in. But relying only on logic makes everything feel mechanical. I've found that introducing creativity, even in small ways, adds an energy that makes work feel more fulfilling. People sometimes think creativity is only for artists or designers, but I've seen it play a role in every kind of work. It's about thinking differently, questioning routines, and allowing new ideas to surface. Even something as simple as finding a better way to structure a report, improving a workflow, or approaching a problem from a different angle can make a huge difference. I've also realized that creativity isn't something you force. It happens naturally when there's space for it. Some of my best ideas have come when I wasn't overthinking or pressuring myself to come up with something brilliant. The mind needs both structure and freedom. Too much of one without the other, and things start to break down. At the end of the day, balancing logic and creativity isn't about choosing one over the other. It's about knowing when to use each. Structure keeps things running smoothly, but creativity is what keeps work interesting, meaningful, and full of possibilities. The more I've embraced both, the more I've found enjoyment in what I do, and the easier it's been to bring fresh ideas into even the most routine tasks. Creativity in routine work. I've seen that even the most repetitive tasks can become more interesting with a bit of creativity. Work doesn't have to feel like an endless cycle of the same thing every day. It's not about changing the work itself, but changing how you approach it. When I started looking for small ways to make routine tasks more efficient, engaging, or even just slightly different, everything felt less like a grind and more like a challenge. Creativity isn't about inventing something revolutionary. It's often just about thinking differently. I've found that tweaking a process, streamlining a workflow, or simply changing the order in which things are done can make a huge difference. Sometimes even using a new tool or method can breathe fresh life into the same old work. There's a common belief that creativity belongs to certain roles, but I've seen it applied in every kind of job, whether it's improving the way a team communicates, organizing tasks in a way that makes them easier to manage, or even finding ways to make meetings more productive. Creativity is just about making things work better. I've also noticed that creativity builds on itself. The more I experiment with new approaches, the easier it becomes to see possibilities where I wouldn't have before. It's like a habit. The more you exercise it, the more naturally it comes. And the best part, it makes work feel less like an obligation and more like something worth engaging in. Bringing creativity into routine work isn't about making huge changes. It's about being open to new ways of doing things. Even the smallest shifts can turn a dull task into something interesting. I found that once I stopped accepting routine as something unchangeable, work became a lot more enjoyable and, surprisingly, much more productive. Fostering a creative mindset. I've learned that creativity isn't something you either have or don't have. It's a mindset, and it can be developed. The more I've allowed myself to think differently, the more naturally ideas come. It's not about forcing inspiration, but about staying open to new ways of seeing things. I've noticed that when people say they aren't creative, it's usually because they've been stuck in the same patterns for too long, not because creativity isn't there. One of the biggest shifts for me was realizing that creativity doesn't always come from sitting down and trying to be creative. Sometimes the best ideas show up when I'm doing something completely unrelated, taking a walk, listening to music, or just letting my mind wander. The more space I give myself to explore ideas without pressure, the easier it becomes to approach problems from fresh angles. I've also seen that creativity thrives in environments where curiosity is encouraged. When there's room to ask, what if, or try something new without immediate judgment, ideas flow much more freely. The more I experiment, the more I realize that there's no single right way to do things. There are always different approaches waiting to be explored. Another thing I've learned is that creativity builds momentum. The more I use it, the more natural it feels. It's like training a muscle. At first, it might feel unfamiliar, but with time, it becomes second nature. When I stopped looking at creativity as something reserved for special moments and started integrating it into my daily work, everything became more engaging and exciting. For me, fostering a creative mindset isn't about waiting for inspiration. It's about staying open, being willing to try new things, and giving myself permission to step outside the usual way of thinking. The more I do that, the more I find that creativity isn't something rare. It's always there, just waiting to be used. Play versus work, structured versus unstructured thinking. I've found that the best work happens when there's a balance between structure and spontaneity. Too much structure and everything starts to feel rigid and monotonous. Too much unstructured thinking and it becomes chaotic and unfocused. The real magic happens when both sides work together, when there's a clear direction but also the freedom to explore new ideas along the way. Work by nature is structured. There are deadlines, expectations, and responsibilities that require logical thinking and planning. That kind of organization is necessary, but I've seen that relying only on structure can drain the energy out of work. When everything becomes a checklist, it's easy to lose motivation and feel disconnected from what you're doing. Play, on the other hand, is unstructured. It allows for curiosity, experimentation, and unexpected discoveries. I've noticed that when I give myself permission to step outside of rigid frameworks, even for a moment, fresh ideas surface effortlessly. Some of my best solutions have come when I wasn't even actively trying to solve a problem, when I was just letting my mind wander and explore possibilities without restriction. I've learned that structured and unstructured thinking aren't opposites. They actually support each other. Structure gives direction, and play keeps things interesting. The more I allow space for both, the more enjoyable and effective my work becomes. Instead of forcing creativity into a strict schedule or abandoning structure completely, I've found that the key is knowing when to switch between the two. For me, the best approach is to use structure as a foundation, but always leave room for flexibility. When work allows for a bit of playfulness, new insights emerge naturally, and tasks that once felt routine start to feel more engaging. It's not about choosing one over the other. It's about finding the right rhythm where both can exist together. The role of flow in creativity. I've noticed that my best ideas never come when I'm forcing myself to be creative. They show up when I'm completely immersed in something, when I forget about time, stop overthinking, and just let things unfold naturally. That's what I've come to understand as flow. It's that state where everything clicks, ideas come effortlessly, and work feels more like an experience than a task. Flow isn't something you can force. It happens when there's just the right balance of challenge and ease. If something is too easy, it becomes boring. If it's too difficult, it creates frustration. But when the challenge is engaging enough to keep me focused while still allowing a sense of play, I've found that creativity flows without effort. I used to think the only way to be productive was to concentrate harder, but I've realized that sometimes the best thing to do is step back. I've had moments where I walked away from a problem, let my mind wander, and suddenly the answer appeared out of nowhere. That's because creativity doesn't always work in a straight line. It thrives when there's room to explore. The more I've embraced flow, the more I've learned to trust the process. Instead of forcing ideas, I set up an environment where creativity can naturally emerge, whether that means working without distractions, getting lost in a task I enjoy, or simply allowing myself to experiment without pressure. For me, flow is what turns work into something more meaningful. It's what makes creativity feel effortless rather than something I have to push through. When I let go of rigid expectations and allow myself to get fully absorbed in what I'm doing, that's when the best work happens. Encouraging a culture of creativity in the workplace. I've seen that the most innovative workplaces aren't the ones that demand creativity. They're the ones that make space for it. When people feel free to explore ideas, experiment without fear of failure, and question the usual way of doing things, creativity naturally flourishes. But in environments where everything is rigid, overly structured, or driven by fear of mistakes, creativity gets shut down before it even has a chance to breathe. One of the biggest creativity killers I've noticed is the idea that everything needs to be perfect from the start. Creativity doesn't work that way. The best ideas often come through trial and error, unexpected discoveries, and even failures. When people feel like they need to get it right the first time, they hesitate, second guess themselves, and end up playing it safe. But when there's room to experiment, creativity flows much more freely. I've also found that creativity thrives in collaborative environments. When people share ideas openly, build on each other's thoughts, and challenge perspectives in a constructive way, new possibilities emerge. It's not about one person having all the answers. It's about creating a space where different viewpoints come together to spark something fresh. Encouraging brainstorming sessions, open discussions, and casual idea sharing can make a huge difference in keeping creativity alive. Another key factor is reducing unnecessary pressure. I've noticed that when people are constantly stressed about deadlines, performance metrics, or expectations, their creativity shuts down. The brain needs space to make connections, and that doesn't happen under constant pressure. Encouraging breaks, allowing time for reflection, and giving people the freedom to work in ways that suit them helps unlock more innovative thinking. Ultimately, a creative workplace isn't about forcing creativity. It's about removing the barriers that block it. The more people feel safe to explore, experiment, and express ideas without judgment, the more naturally creativity will thrive. In my experience, workplaces that value curiosity over perfection, collaboration over competition, and exploration over rigid rules end up being the most dynamic, innovative, and enjoyable places to work. Creativity as a self-sustaining cycle. I've found that creativity isn't something you use up. It's something that grows the more you engage with it. The more I experiment with ideas, try new approaches, and push beyond routine, the easier it becomes to think creatively in all areas of work. Creativity feeds on itself, and once the momentum starts, it becomes a natural part of how I approach challenges and opportunities. One of the biggest misconceptions I've come across is that creativity comes from waiting for inspiration. In reality, I've seen that the more I actively use creativity, the more naturally it flows. It's like a muscle. The more I exercise it, the stronger it gets. If I rely on inspiration alone, I might wait forever. But if I make a habit of exploring new ideas, questioning the usual way of doing things, and allowing myself to be curious, creativity becomes second nature. I've also noticed that creativity sparks more creativity, not just in myself, but in those around me. When one person introduces a fresh perspective or finds a unique way to solve a problem, it encourages others to think differently as well. This is why creative environments feel so energizing. They don't just produce new ideas. They create a cycle where everyone feels inspired to contribute and innovate. Another thing I've learned is that creativity isn't always about big, groundbreaking ideas. Sometimes it's just about small changes, tweaking a process, organizing information in a new way, or experimenting with different approaches. These small shifts add up, and over time, they completely transform the way I work. Once I started looking at creativity as something I could build on rather than a rare moment of brilliance, everything felt more exciting and dynamic. For me, the key to keeping creativity alive is simply engaging with it consistently. The more I explore, experiment, and play with ideas, the more creative thinking becomes a natural and effortless part of my work. It's not something that runs out. It's something that expands as long as I keep using it. Innovation stemming from play. I've seen that some of the best ideas don't come from intense brainstorming sessions or rigid problem solving. They come from moments of play. When there's freedom to experiment, explore, and think without pressure, creativity thrives. Play isn't just about having fun. It's about removing limitations, allowing the mind to wander, and discovering unexpected solutions. Some of the most groundbreaking innovations have come from people who were simply curious enough to try something new. What I've noticed is that play removes the fear of failure. When something is approached in a playful way, there's no pressure to get it right immediately, which makes people more willing to take risks and think differently. This is where real breakthroughs happen. When the mind isn't stuck in a loop of perfectionism, but is open to possibilities. Even small moments of playful thinking can lead to major insights that wouldn't have surfaced in a more rigid, structured setting. I've found that when people approach work with a sense of play, problems become puzzles rather than obstacles. Instead of looking at a challenge as frustrating or limiting, play encourages the question, what if? That simple shift in thinking leads to creative solutions that might have never been considered otherwise. It's not about forcing innovation. It's about creating an environment where it can naturally emerge. The more I've embraced play in my own work, the more I've realized that it isn't a distraction. It's a tool. Playfulness helps break patterns, encourages exploration, and makes work feel less like an obligation and more like an opportunity to create something new. I've noticed that the best teams and workplaces allow time for playful exploration, whether through brainstorming sessions, open-ended discussions, or just encouraging curiosity in everyday tasks. For me, the connection between play and innovation is clear. When work is approached with a sense of curiosity and openness, new ideas flow effortlessly. The less pressure there is to follow a strict path, the more room there is for real breakthroughs to happen. If creativity is the spark, play is the fuel that keeps it alive. Personalizing creativity in the workplace. I've realized that creativity isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. What works for one person may not work for another. And that's perfectly fine. Creativity is personal. It comes from what excites, challenges, or interests you. I've seen that the more someone aligns creativity with their natural strengths and preferences, the easier it becomes to bring fresh ideas into their work. It's not about forcing creativity into a rigid framework, but about finding what sparks inspiration on an individual level. For me, creativity comes alive when I have space to think, explore, and try new things without immediate pressure. Others may thrive in collaborative discussions, bouncing ideas off a team, while some people do their best creative thinking in solitude. The key is recognizing what environment, process, or mindset allows ideas to flow most naturally. Once I figured that out, creativity became much easier to tap into, rather than something I had to struggle to access. I've also noticed that personal creativity often shows up in the little things, not just in big projects or innovations. It can be as simple as reorganizing a workflow to make it more efficient, finding a better way to communicate an idea, or approaching a routine task from a fresh angle. These small creative choices add up over time and make a significant difference in how engaging and fulfilling work feels. Another thing I've learned is that personal creativity is something that evolves. What works today might not work tomorrow, and that's okay. The more I experiment with different approaches, whether it's changing how I brainstorm, the way I structure my day, or the tools I use, the more I refine what truly works for me. Creativity isn't about following a set formula. It's about constantly adapting and staying open to new ways of thinking. In the end, I've found that creativity feels most natural when it's aligned with who I am and how I work best. When I stop trying to fit into someone else's creative process and instead trust my own way of thinking, exploring, and problem solving, work becomes not just productive, but also far more enjoyable. Creativity is personal, and the more I embrace that, the more effortlessly it flows.